Welcome everybody to Weekly Quantum World Detangled, Season 3, Episode 2. This time not from Miami Beach, but my old hometown, a ghostly New York City that will be back very soon. Today I'm joined by my friends and sponsors, Denise Ruffner from INQ.
Hi everyone, Denise Ruffner, VP Business Development at INQ, coming to you from, I'd say sunny Southern California, except it's 5:30 in the morning, so it's black outside. Happy to be here, and I guess Tommaso is at the beach today.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful day here in Singapore. Well, it was, but it's also late in the evening here, so using a virtual background, obviously. Very happy to be here as well. Tommaso from Entropic Labs, as I mentioned, calling you all from Singapore.
And we have a special guest calling us from Bali, maybe somewhere else. He's wearing a sweater. Itamar Sivan, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for welcoming me in the show today. So I'm calling in from Israel, from Tel Aviv. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Quantum Machines, an Israeli quantum computing startup company. This is, as you could see, a virtual background. So this is what I dream of during lockdowns here in COVID times.
And talking about dreams, let's look at the first half of that a little bit. Maybe your personal journey. You studied in France, in Paris. I know that Quantum Machines has some people in France, I believe. How did this all get started for you personally and your own little journey?
So how did Quantum Machines started for me personally? So basically it started a long time ago because quantum computing is for me a passion that dates long back. So already from my bachelor's, which I indeed did at the École Normale Supérieure, I started gaining the passion for quantum computing. Back then we called it more of a quantum information processing, because back then it was more than 10 years ago. If you would ask the average physicist, when are we going to have quantum computers at full scale, they would think you're some kind of a wacko. So back then it was quantum information processing, and then through my master thesis that I did at Oxford, working on quantum optics, and my PhD at the Weizmann Institute, I always had this passion for quantum computing and quantum information processing. And I've also worked on, let's say, on things to do with entrepreneurship and startups, especially in the institute where I did my PhD. So at some point, I was telling myself and one of and my other co-founders here at QM. So kind of the question of, what do we know about this world? We know quantum computing and we know many things about entrepreneurship, and there was no option but to combine them. So this is on the personal level how Quantum Machines started, and basically as we wanted to combine them, we found ourselves founding the first quantum computing startup in Israel.
And a lot of people in French still call quantum computers calculateur quantique, quantum calculator, so it's still a little bit of a different mentality. You have a family and a son. You mentioned online somewhere that you love drinking coffee and eating chocolate together. You're rock climbing when you're not dreaming of the tropics. And you started something called the NOAA Institute a few years ago. Can you maybe say a few words about that?
About the NOAA initiative? Yeah, sure. So basically, when I came back from France to Israel, it was in the midst of a real estate crisis here in Israel, with real estate prices shooting to the sky. We reached a not glorious first place in the world of having the average house price per average salary being highest in the world. Together with a few friends, we decided that something has to be done, and we launched basically an initiative to start a movement for founding new neighborhoods aimed at young couples that want to, start their families, and be able to offer them pricing at fair prices. So that's what we were working on, and I can say that we've led to some very interesting impact.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for joining us. Let's learn more about quantum machines.
So hi, Itamar. Nice to meet you. I have all these business questions for you, but I wanted to stop at your LinkedIn profile. I love that on your LinkedIn profile, you said, "I never give up." And that really resonated with me. I don't either. So tell me about that.
Sure. So with pleasure. So I'll try to tell you about that while being humble. This, I think that the best way for me to explain that is that I'm specifically at quantum machines, and even in my background at the École Normale Supérieure and during my PhD and so on and so forth, I was always surrounded by brilliant people. Very, very smart people, very talented people. And I tend to believe that I reached a few good results so far in my life. And I don't think that I'm among the smartest people, and nor among the most talented people. I think that what allowed me so far to reach good results is the fact that I work extremely hard. I work extremely hard, and I never put down my pen. I don't give up. I don't stop ever. And I think that if there is one thing that allows me to kind of do great things, is just that I work extremely hard, and I indeed never give up.
Well, I love that. Me too. Right on. So that's great. Wanted to find out a little bit more about your company, and kind of let the audience know a little bit more about your company. I see that in March of last year, you closed a Series A round for $17.5 million, which is very impressive, with TLV Partners and Battery Ventures and a couple other investors. So congratulations.
Thanks.
And how many employees do you have roughly?
Roughly 40 people.
Wow, that's really impressive. Can you just, I think Tommaso is going to get a little bit more into what your company does, but maybe you can just give us a little overview in one sentence, because then I have some more questions for you.
Okay, so great. So maybe let's start with some big words and some big well, let's start with the motivation for quantum computing. I know your audience is already aware of it, but it's still important to stress, I think, to emphasize every time. Basically, we're in the field of quantum computing, and quantum computing is all about unleashing immense computational power, right? Quantum computers have the promise for immense computational power, which is far, 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 and I'd need many, many fars beyond anything we could build with classical computing, right? In some ways, I think I know it's not correct to say that, especially as a physicist, but it's almost like infinite computational power for some tasks, right? So we're really talking about computers that will not simply do the same things that we do, but faster, not twice faster, 3 times faster, 100 times faster. We're talking about computers that will make impossible computational tasks possible. Okay, so that's kind of the general the general motivation, right? And the potential for this immense computational power lies within what we call the quantum processor. Right? Quantum processors are these unique processors which are based on quantum mechanics, which themselves have this potential for immense computational power. Therefore, I always like to give you an analogy of the quantum processor to a muscle. Right? I think that this is a good analogy. You can think of the quantum processor as an extremely strong muscle that can do extremely heavy lifting. the strongest muscle on earth, right? But extending on this analogy, I'm sure the entire audience will agree with me that even the strongest muscle on earth needs a different system to operate it, right? So I'm sure each and every one in the audience agrees with me, and that is the brain, right? The muscle cannot lift a single thing, not even a pencil, even just a piece of paper, right? You cannot see the paper in my hand now. Without the brain sending pulses to it, giving it orders, and realizing its potential. Now, to your question, Dennis, what are we doing in quantum computing? We're building the brains of quantum computers. We're building systems that control quantum processors, operate them, and allow to realize their potential.
As a neuroscientist, I appreciate that explanation. Thank you for that. Good
Thanks.
plug.
In fact, even on the technical level, the brain sends pulses to the muscle, right? And also, our systems plug in to quantum processors and send pulses, analog pulses to them. So in fact, it's actually on the technical level, it's also a good analogy. Yeah.
Great. Who are your competitors?
So who are our competitors? So I think that this is a fantastic question, and competitors is not always a very easy question in an emerging industry, because in an emerging industry, it's unclear yet how the value chain, I hope this term is clear to the entire audience, will look like at the end game of the industry. So in fact, we are the first company in the world to be solely focused on the control and operation systems of quantum computers. Okay, what we call today orchestration, the orchestration layer of quantum computers. So, and the reason why we are the first company in the world is because this is an emerging industry, and we were the first ones to identify this huge unmet need in the orchestration layer. And so I think that this is a great question, but one that we will have to revise every year, maybe from now until quantum computers are built at full scale. So for the time being, our competitors, concretely, there are a couple of new startups that started during the last year that also try to do what we're doing with very little funding so far. And another aspect of our competition is basically the internal teams at some of our customers or potential customers, which are aiming to develop things which are similar to what we're developing. And again, this goes to the question of the value chain. How's the value chain going to look like? Because I think that this is going to be one of the most interesting developments of the next few years as this industry progresses and we see the value chain forming. We see new players entering the field and themselves forming how the value chain is going to look like.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to hand you over to Tommaso.
Thank you, Denise. Thanks. And thank you for joining us. So, Itamar, I'll try to continue from what you and Denise have been discussing so far. So the technology is super interesting, right? And something I've noticed from quantum machines is that just like Singapore, you guys love acronyms. So Singapore is obsessed as a nation with acronyms. Everything becomes an acronym. And I saw that you have like OPX, and you have QUA. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And I think the interesting question here is, if you don't mind, are you a quantum computing software company? Are you a quantum computing hardware company? And I'm saying that just because usually people think with this dichotomy in mind, either software or quantum. But I think what you guys are doing is quite interesting because, if I understand correctly, it mixes both. Can you say a few words about that?
Sure. So that's a good question, and the short answer is yes, you're right. We combine both. Our quantum orchestration platform is a full stack hardware and software control system for quantum computers, and I think that indeed people tend to divide the world into hardware and software. And then divide each one of them to a million other layers. But in quantum computers, there are three, if you wish, there are at least three main layers, which are equivalent to what we were used to from classical computers as being hardware and software. In quantum computers, we have quantum hardware, classical hardware, and software. Okay, so that's the minimum division that you have to make into each and every quantum computer, just like you do to every classical computer hardware and software. There is always quantum hardware, classical hardware, and software. You cannot do without any of those, right? And at Quantum Machines, we develop a combination of the classical hardware and software parts of the quantum computer into a unified platform, which allows controlling and operating any quantum processor. Okay, so we are qubit agnostic. So we work with, so our classical hardware and the software can run algorithms on all types of quantum processors, including trapped ions, superconducting qubits, trapped neutral atoms, even topological qubits, if you wish, and quantum dots. We actually have customers working on all of those that I mentioned, and others. And of course, above us, there is much more hardware. Even more software. Okay, so of course software is endless, right? So you can always stack more and more and more layers. Some of these layers at the top of the stack are crucial now as we build quantum computers. So above us there are still additional layers of software, but below us there is only the quantum processors themselves. We plug in directly to them.
Thanks. And in fact, this actually takes me to another question that I always find very interesting. Is a topic I really love, which is the whole idea of, let's just call it for simplicity, a quantum computing stack. So you kind of mentioned that, or at least you hinted at the idea. So you have the quantum hardware, you have the classical hardware, and then on top of that, you have software that, let me simplify, controls what happens at the machine level.
Yeah.
So, of course, we have decades and decades of development in classical computing when it comes to the stack.
Yeah.
Do you think, or maybe I should just ask, how do you think is a future quantum computing stack going to look like? Is it going to be radically different from the classical one? Is it going to have layers that are uniquely quantum? I guess the obvious answer is yes. But what are your views on that?
Fantastic. So I think that's a great question. I think, in fact, it is going to be much more similar to what we have in classical computers than we actually see today. In fact, I think it's going to be radically different from what we have today in quantum computers. Right? It's going to be less of what we have today in quantum computers and much more similar to what we have in classical computers. So what do I mean by that? So today we have a lot of still vertical integration in quantum computers. Okay, much of it is due to the fact that the diversity of companies in the field is still, well, it's not too diverse, right? So you have very little. If you now want to start a new company, so you basically need to develop much of the entire stack for yourself, because there is not much offered out there, right? Especially the companies, many of the companies today, they started like, let's say, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So there was really nothing out there, right? So there's a lot of vertical integration today. So you have companies that are vertically integrating the entire computer and then just giving it through the cloud of mostly of the big cloud providers. I think that and many people think that this is going to be broken down piece by piece as we progress. Okay, just as it did with classical computers, right? You have the companies that provide the processors, NVIDIA, Intel, AMD, Xilinx, and so on and so forth. But they do not provide the entire system, right? So, and then the entire system can be either assembled by other companies that can just assemble these processors and pack them into systems and then offer them to the cloud providers, or it can be assembled by the cloud providers, right? So this is very far from what we're seeing today, but this is what this is the signals also that we're getting from many players in the field, and this is what I believe is going to happen in the next 10 years. Okay, so it's going to be a process, but I think that this is clear that it's going towards this end, and kind of plugging into to that picture. So quantum machines is the vision here is to become the #1 provider of cloud infrastructure for quantum computing, right? So we will provide to the cloud vendors the entire infrastructure that is required to control and operate optimally any quantum processor, right? So they can bring on any quantum processor, never mind from who and of what type, from, you know, quantum dots, superconducting qubits, that's okay. We will provide the entire infrastructure, hardware and software, that will provide to control these and realize their potential.
Thanks. Yeah, great. Few thoughts from there before I'll pass it to André for the closing questionnaire. So maybe one way to summarize everything that we have just described, the quantum computing stack is going to change, or at least Itamar thinks, and I agree with that mostly, that the quantum computing stack is going to change a lot moving forward. We are not going to have a single player providing everything, maybe as some companies are trying to do today, which also means, which is not something you said, Itamar, but I'll add it, I'll just throw it in there, that there's a lot of opportunities for other people to enter into the field, because there's a lot of bits and pieces that are still missing, which I think is one of the most exciting things about quantum computing.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe I can just add one more sentence about that. I think that I'll say something which is maybe obvious already for your audience, but really quantum computers are difficult to build. Okay, this is an understatement. So we're making really great progress, but reaching the full scale, fault tolerant quantum computers, you know, unleashing this immense competition, the power that could be available thanks to quantum computers is the moonshot of moonshots. Okay, this is one of the biggest tests that we're working on as a society. Okay, so indeed, Tommaso, I think that there are many opportunities for new companies, because as we progress, each and every piece of the computer is going to be a huge challenge, and it will require specialized companies, just like it did with classical computers. As it progresses, today already the challenge is immense. You know, scaling up to hundreds of qubits, then thousands of qubits, this is a huge challenge. But going beyond that, you know, some things which maybe today are like two people working in a company, I don't know, in the big companies, can become a real company, because each and every piece is going to just become a huge challenge. May I say, even a huge mess. Yeah.
Thanks. Beautiful. André, you take it from here. Thank you.
Itamar, we're about to wrap up with 6 rapid-fire questions to get to know you still a little bit better, and your challenge will be to give very short answers to these very short questions, one word to one sentence, and just speak from your heart. So if you're ready for the Marcel Bruce adapted quantum questionnaire, let's get started. Who is your favorite?
Okay. As you could see until now, I'm not very good with brief questions, but I'll do my best. So should I answer with one sentence or one word? What did you say?
I'm very good at enforcing short answers, and I'll give you the leeway between one word and one short sentence.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's start it. Who's your favorite scientist?
My favorite scientist. My favorite scientist. My favorite scientist. My favorite scientist. You know the you know the. I guess that the answer, if I had to answer from the top of my head, you know, that would be Feynman. But I guess so.
Feynman it is. Who is your favorite entrepreneur?
My favorite entrepreneur. I don't have a favorite entrepreneur.
Yet to be.
Is that a good question? Is that an okay answer?
That is an okay answer. What is the quality that you look for most in an entrepreneur?
What is the quality that I look? Fighter. Has to be a fighter.
And in a scientist?
Think differently. Be creative.
What is it that excites you most about working in quantum?
In quantum, I think that as working in quantum today is in the industry is the limitless capabilities of what this technology can unleash. This is what excites me most.
What might be your favorite application of quantum, even thinking beyond computing, sensing, communications, or things we haven't thought about yet?
I don't think I have a favorite application. I think that quantum computing is going to change the world in a way that we're not anticipating even. So I think that thinking of specific applications is just underestimating.
Then let's try it this way. What is your quantum dream?
My quantum dream. My quantum dream. I don't know what exactly you mean. So you mean like being in several places at the same time?
Yeah, well, you know, when you think about the quantum, you dream, you have your coffee and chocolate, or maybe a glass of wine. What do you dream about?
So you mean like in the future of quantum, or my quantum dream? I'll be practical. So I think that my quantum dream is to see a fault tolerant quantum computer. That's what we're after.
Do you have a quantum nightmare?
A quantum nightmare. Wow. So again, this goes for. I think that seriously, quantum computers are going to change the world in an unpredictable way. I hope for the good, but everything can happen.
Imagine we get that fault-tolerant universal quantum computer and wake up to tomorrow. Who would you give it to?
A fault-tolerant quantum computer, who will I give it to?
We have all. It's in your living room, and you get to you can't use it. You have to give it to somebody.
Oh wow. Oh wow. It's a tricky question. I think it's a tricky question because there is some. It depends on the context. Am I the only one to have it, or are there others in the world? I think it's complex.
Good, Itamar. We appreciate your fire and your insights and your perspective. It was a pleasure having you. And today from New York with the beautiful Chrysler building, planned and built in the 20s, the golden age of New York, when radio, cinema, automotive, the new technologies of that age 100 years ago were about to be consumerized. So may you build your own quantum Chrysler building. Thank you to our sponsors and co-hosts Denise Ruffner and INQ, Tommaso and Entropica, again in his Entropica Labs t-shirt.
Just for you, André, just for you.
Don't forget to get a haircut next time. This concludes Season 3, Episode 2 of the Weekly Quantum World Detangled, and you are now detangled.